Next up on the broadcast, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth is back in studio with us. Governor, always nice to see you. Welcome back to Capitol Journal.
Yeah, always great to be on the show.
Governor, you have had some headline-making concerns in the last week about where we are in Alabama with our pandemic preparations are concerned and where we are going. Some have called you brave and heroic for taking the stand, and others have wondered maybe are you butting heads with Governor Ivey and the administration. Your concern, first and foremost, is keeping the state safe, right?
Yeah, my concern's simple. I serve on the task force along with other members. I represent the state. I think it's my job on the task force to call something out if I didn't see adequate preparation or needs being met. And that's what I did. And I felt that this is a serious, probably the most serious thing that we've faced in my lifetime, and probably most people's lifetime. I think that, my concern was the preparation and the plans in place were not adequate. I feel confident now. I think certainly the task force is addressing those, and happy to see that happening.
You mentioned the task force. This is, of course, the coronavirus task force that the governor put together to look at a lot of different angles of this outbreak. One of your concerns that you outlined in a letter to that task force about a week ago was that we weren't doing enough forward thinking, as it were. We were thinking about the now, but not thinking about what we'll be up against 2 or 3 weeks from now.
That's right. Yeah, and at the time, what I just heard continuous discussion over businesses, different things like that. And my concern was, okay, we've got to make sure we get prepared for what could happen. Worst case scenario, hospitals being over capacity. That takes time to build. It takes a partnership with the federal government in some cases. Making sure we go ahead and order and get ahead of the curve on this PPE and have stockpiles in place. And when I asked the questions at the time, those things weren't answered, and I had tremendous concern.
PPE, of course, is personal protective equipment, which we all know is in short supply for our healthcare workers. And we were heartened to hear in the last week that Apple CEO Tim Cook, an Alabama native, had made a very generous offer to help us in that respect, and we hope more of help like that will be forthcoming.
Yeah, the good news is, so obviously Apple, what Tim Cook did, we've got some, from the federal stockpile, we've received some supplies. Plus, the governor's, got a group of people now that are working on that very hard to find PPEs and make sure that, it's not counterfeit items, that it is appropriate, and we're going to make sure we get those to our hospitals, so that's important.
The headlines since your letter came out, which said things like you were butting heads with the governor over this, is that how you characterize this?
No, not at all. I was just bringing awareness to a issue I thought we were deficient and didn't have a plan on, and that it needed to be addressed, and we also need to take this seriously. You can remember before this, I sent out basically a call to action video of the state saying we're not taking this serious enough. And when you look at the data and exponential growth and where the numbers were going, it was clear to me every healthcare professional that I talked to said the same thing. This is going to grow. We've got to put measures in place to stop the growth, and people are not taking this serious enough. And so I felt it was my job on that task force to just bring to light the fact, and it was a fact because data and science backed up the fact that every scientist, every doctor was saying turned out to be true.
You said in your letter that, among other things, you thought the state should look more closely at contracting with family doctors and their staffs to help with patient surges.
Yeah, so let me tell you what I found. And, so one of the issues in if the surge comes is obviously you got to first have capacity. The second thing, you've got to have doctors and nurses, right? Additional doctors and nurses. Well, what I've found is now a lot of the, family practitioners in the communities, have seen, people are just calling in or they're not going to the doctor for fear of getting sick. And so we have hundreds, maybe thousands of doctors and nurses. Some of these doctors are even having to lay off their nurses because they don't have enough work that could go right into assisting our hospitals that are already trained. I think that's a great way to make sure we get people plugged in.
The situation is a highly emotional one, if nothing else. I guess there have been some worries that maybe because of the position you took that it had fostered some rift between you and the governor's office. That's not the case, is it?
No, we're working together now. Right now, governor's office task force with working on our small business commission, making sure we get out messages, how we can help, small businesses. And look, there's nothing wrong with having a disagreement of opinion or saying, hey, I think we're deficient in that. I would call that leadership, pointing out a deficiency and saying we need to draw action. And I'm proud to say that the whole state's working together to solve this now.
You said something earlier I thought was rather prescient, and that is this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Despite our best efforts, these numbers are going to continue to climb for a couple of weeks.
That's right. So one of the things that's interesting about this and how you manage it, you look, the decisions you're making today are going to have an impact 14 to 21 days down the road. And so, the numbers now are from, 14 to 21 days ago. And so, the fortunately, Dr. Harris is doing a great job, a great leader for our state, and the things he's putting in place are going to protect us to hopefully help and flatten the curve. The thing that concerns me is this: there's a lot of the public that still is not taking this serious. And so my call to action for all Alabamians is to do what you can do to make sure you flatten the curve. What does that mean? Make sure you practice social distancing. Make sure you practice good hygiene. Make sure that you're staying 6 foot away from others. If you've got kids, you don't need to be having sleepovers. This is not vacation. If you're going out on the water, you don't need to be having big boat parties and having friends over. Stay away, stay home when you can. If you got to work, make sure you practice social distancing. If everybody in Alabama will do what they need to, we can actually beat this and flatten the curve.
Your call to action of a couple of weeks ago came right before the state beaches were closed. But at the time you issued that call, there were packed beaches in South Alabama, spring breakers and others who weren't taking this seriously enough. Was that one of the things that impressed you to say what you did?
I think just overall, just talking to people saying, is this for real or is this just like the flu? You heard all kind of different comments, and I think people really weren't taking it serious. I think people are starting to now, but if everybody in Alabama will do what they need to do and keep away from people and practice good hygiene, we can quit spreading the virus, which will flatten the curve.
Governor, when we say things like limiting interaction to groups of 10 or less, that means in your personal home, too.
Correct.
You see a lot of people having family members over for get-togethers on a Sunday afternoon. Were there more than 10 people at that get-together? You've got to think about these sorts of things.
Yeah, I would say just keep it to your family. You don't need to have extended family. You don't need to be inviting friends over. That stuff's cut out. That stuff will all come back. But right now, it's time to focus on how do we flatten the curve, and everybody's got to be smart and use common sense.
We've seen a couple of instances around the country that were a little encouraging this week. Washington State, for instance, said that it looked like, at least where things stand now, that social distancing was beginning to pay off there. New York City, even though it's the epicenter of this pandemic right now, social distancing seems to have done some good there, and we want that to be true here too.
Absolutely, and I think we're certainly going to see the benefits of everything we put in place. And again, Dr. Harris is putting these recommendations out there, but it frustrates me when I see people, they close the beach, for instance, on the coast, but 200 yards from the beach, they're on an island, and there's 300-400 people on an island with boats. We've got to cut that out. And it's just the little things, right? Don't invite your kids' friends over to play. That's the stuff we've got to cut out. And then if we do that, we can beat this, and we're going to beat this, but everybody's got to be smart and use common sense.
Before we close, Governor, I just want to reiterate, there is no rift between you and the governor's office, is there?
No, the governor and I are getting along great. There's no rift. We're in this together. All I did was just point out something that I thought was just one thing. She's done a lot of great things on this. It's just that one particular area, I saw something, and I wanted to make sure that our task force was taking this serious. So Governor Ivey are great. Our offices talk every day, and we're going to continue to work hard for the people of Alabama.
This is going to get worse before it gets better, but are we going to come out of this?
Absolutely. We're going to come out of this, but what we need is everyone in Alabama to work together to help defeat this.
Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, thank you for your leadership during this time, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Don.
You bet. And Capitol Journal, we'll be right back.